It's time for Tab Talks, your weekly conversation about matters of faith. I'm your host, Jennifer Rash.
And I'm your co-host, Debbie Campbell.
We are doing the first Tab Talks via Zoom, practicing our social distancing during this COVID-19 scenario that we're all in. And we're all talking about a lot of different things happening right now. One of the issues is just how to survive, how to thrive, how to work through and navigate this unknown season. And so at the Alabama Baptist and Tab Media, we are fortunate and privileged to have a licensed professional counselor on our board of directors. So welcome, Dr. Melissa Golden.
Good morning.
Well, we are glad you're willing to spend some time with us. We wanted to talk through a lot of the issues that people are facing right now. We know they're all over the board, but one of the things that we were excited about was to see that you are putting together some video counseling sessions, some quick snippets, if you will, through your transformation counseling. So tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Yes, Jennifer, last week as the COVID crisis really started to affect our area, we sat at home with our families and we tuned in to our pastors on Sunday morning and then again on Wednesday night. And, we're just watching our leaders and how do we respond? And so, the first couple of lessons, the Sunday morning sermons were really just pointing us upward. We were pointed to Christ. We were told not to fear. We went through the scriptures on truth about what is happening in our world and how we can trust God through all of that. And so I was just really touched by the idea of first, we need to be looking upward. And then by Wednesday night, our lessons were, okay, this is a crisis, but it's also an opportunity for us to inwardly draw near to Christ. And so here are all the ideas, here are all the resources for you to be spending time in scripture, spending time in prayer, and drawing closer to God. And so then I was touched again by we're looking upward, and then we also need to be looking inward at the way that we are experiencing this crisis. And of course, the next step then is to look outward. And so I kind of just felt this tension of, how are we supposed to help? What are we supposed to be doing? We're supposed to be distancing ourselves from each other, and that's generally how we minister to each other. We come together and we gather together to help, but yet we're being told to stay home. And so what do we do? And so, as I just kind of started thinking about those three categories, looking upward and then looking inward, and then the next step being to look outward, I thought, I think a safe way to serve others in this time is to develop a little video series. And so what has kind of come out of that is just coming to speak on different topics on mental and emotional health. And so we're just putting together some little 10-minute video clips on things like anxiety, suffering well, placing our hope and our trust in God during a fearful time. And so it's been really fun to put together those resources and just to kind of put them out there for those that are at home and those that are still working, as we're all just kind of navigating this crisis together.
So true. And you're doing these on YouTube, on your YouTube channel, correct?
That's correct. Transformation Counseling, Inc. We have a YouTube channel, and then you can also find the videos on our transformationcounselinginc.com website in the resources page.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to know about every video, but let me get a big picture here. What Transformation Counseling is headquartered in Prattville, Alabama.
Yes, we are a small counseling practice here in Prattville, Alabama, and just opened up in January. I've been licensed in our state for about 5 years now, but this is a new practice, and we're just really excited to be serving the Prattville area and that community. And then also now with Telehealth, we're able to actually serve the entire state of Alabama. And so we're excited to be offering those mental health services to our community.
Great. Well, walk us through some of these videos. We have 10 videos, is that correct?
Yes, 10 at this point, and hopefully more coming as people are letting us know what issues they want to hear about and want to see addressed. So session 1, we're calling each video clip a session. as we often do in counseling. And really what we walked through in session 1 are those 3 categories of looking upward, looking inward, and looking outward, just to kind of set up the video series. And then also just talked about 3 key lessons that we were really starting to learn this week, or that I was starting to learn about COVID-19. And that was, nobody really knows how to navigate this well. We have not been through a global pandemic before in our lifetime. And so we're all, trying to pool our creative resources and our creativity to put things online and to reach our people in different ways than we're used to. And then another lesson is that, we all have a new and significant stressor on our plates. And so I just talked a little bit about how, some people look like they're doing it really well and others seem to be hurting more and more each day. And so we just got to give ourselves and each other grace, because we have something new and significant on our plates that we are, trying desperately to navigate. And then the third lesson in that video was that we just need each other. We're being told to isolate and socially distance, but we still have to find ways to go through this together. So that's session 1. Session 2, I talk a little bit about one of my things that I love to talk about in counseling is Romans 12:2, and that's being transformed by the renewing of our mind. And so in that video, we talk about how, we're undergoing a crisis, we're under a lot of stress, we're dealing with a lot of new, difficult things. But what the Lord has to offer us, He offers us, and I just picked out a couple of gold nuggets from Philippians 4, and talked about God's peace and His love and His guidance, His sufficiency, and His glory. And, we need to be transforming our minds to live in that spiritual, hopeful world, rather than kind of getting sucked into the fear and the dark messages that are just kind of overwhelming us these days.
On that note, Debbie, share a little bit about what we're doing at Tab Media to help share some of the positive stories, because you're right, Dr. Golden, that is there's so much heaviness to that. So we're doing some of the positive stories and some of the positive things that people do. And so like Debbie, for instance, is one who prayer walked her own neighborhood.
Oh, well, that's true.
She's got some great stories and some great ideas.
Yeah, I did. After this first happened, I decided that, I would get out. What could I do? I was just praying one Saturday morning and just thought, hey, I can just walk this entire neighborhood and pray for every family, for their safety, for their peace, for just God's encouragement. So, I did that. And then I intend to go back out and do it again. And, also I met with 5 of my close neighbors and just let them know that we were here for them. If they ran short on any supply, to please reach out to us and ask us, and we'd be glad to share if there was something we could do to help them. So, and I'm seeing more and more neighbors that I have never met before out walking. So that's a good positive thing, to be able to do something like that. So that's been a good thing.
Yeah, and when Debbie and I were talking about that, and we started talking with our team, we realized a lot of people of faith are out there doing those things, and so we've been excited about telling those stories and sharing. So is that some of what you're talking about, Dr. Golden, is how to find the positive stories that are happening alongside these very difficult stories?
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that I love reading Tab, is because I'm getting my news. I'm hearing about what's going on in my community and our world, but I'm getting it from that hopeful, positive, biblical worldview. One of the very first nights that it seemed like this was starting to really affect our area, we turned on ABC News at home, and it was just the intensity of the voices and the terrible news, and it was fearful and it was stressful. And so we made a decision that we were going to be really careful who we listened to and what we read, in order to just filter our minds about what, how we're receiving our news and how we're receiving what's going on. Because we need that hopeful and that positive. Otherwise, we're just going to be living and dwelling in that fear, and that's just really taking away from what the Lord has for this time.
So true, so true. So, as people watch your videos, then I know I jumped in on your list there, but as they watch, what are you hoping that they will Are you hoping that they'll have grab a tip and then be able to take that and apply it, or what are you hoping will happen?
Yes, I think both of those things. I'm hoping that we'll be able to give some practical tips. In fact, the video that we'll be releasing next will be some practical coping skills for toxic anxiety, and really just another avenue of lifting our eyes upward. This is a crisis, and as a counselor, I certainly don't want us to deny or avoid that, because these stressors are real, and we need to be processing, these difficult emotions and these difficult times. However, we want to keep our eyes on the Lord, and we want to know He has our attention. And so we want to be paying attention to, where is the Lord in this? What is He doing? And how can I respond? Another piece of that renewing the mind is that God's called us to be salt and light in a world that right now it seems especially bland and dark. And this is an opportunity for us as believers. We have God's hope and His peace and His love, and this is a call to action. What better time for us to be sharing our faith and loving on our neighbors and our community to show them that Christ has something different to offer.
That's great.
I noticed that your next video talks about encouragement to suffer well.
Yes.
And, people don't like to hear that word, suffer.
Right.
So how's that work together, encouragement and suffering?
Sure. So the challenge in that video, I ask everybody to think about one of their heroes in the faith that they have read about, or they have seen, or been a part of their story when they endured a really difficult heartache and difficult struggle, as we're thinking about those people or that person right now. And then I ask our viewers to write down what are some of those qualities that those people, certainly we saw them in their anger or their tears. We saw them take their genuine emotions to God and to their friends. And in addition to those, how did we see their faith grow? How did we see them share the gospel with the people that they came into contact with as a result of that suffering and that heartache? And so, COVID-19 is no different. It is a trial, and it is a struggle. And what are we going to do with that? How are we going to respond by suffering well and not just isolating and dwelling in the negative and letting it, destroy us from the inside out?
That's really encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
to go back and see how they handled it.
Right.
We haven't really had to go through something like that. So it does help to know we have those that have gone before us.
Yes. Be that Paul of the Bible, or be that, a book we've read, Jay and Catherine Wolfe, or, others in our lives that we have seen and walked through difficult times with, they've encouraged our faith as they've been heartbroken and struggling. And so, I hope that we will have that testimony. When I open up that video, I say, picture that it's 2030 and, the COVID crisis is over. And somebody asked the question, how did you handle coronavirus of 2020? What will your answer be?
It doesn't take that long, Melissa.
And meaning that when we get to 2030, that we're past the crisis and we're reflecting back on 2020.
That's right. And people are saying, how was it?
Right. Remember the coronavirus of 2020? How did we grow? How did we handle that? And we want to be leaving a legacy now so that we can say, we really did struggle, but also we saw our neighbors prayer walking, and we saw our neighbors encouraging one another. And, my next door neighbor went and got me groceries because I was afraid to get out. What kind of legacy are we leaving now so that when we reflect on this in the future, we can see that we've grown.
That's so good. That's so good. Now, a lot of people are going to be suffering with a heightened level of anxiety. Anxiety is real no matter with or without coronavirus.
Right.
So how are you advising those that already suffer from a level of anxiety, knowing it's going to be at a new level right now?
Mm-hmm, sure. So in the first part of the anxiety video, part one, my desire is to speak to those who are seasoned veterans. Anxiety has been a prevalent issue in our society for a long time. It's not a new issue. And so we want to talk to those that are seasoned veterans, and then we want to talk to those that may be experiencing that really toxic anxiety for the first time. And so that first video really just gives kind of an overview of how our mind and our body responds to anxiety, walking through how we react physiologically, emotionally, cognitively, and then behaviorally. So it's kind of a psychoeducation piece to really understand that. And then the second part of that video just really gives hope, and gives God's truth. And so, I think kind of breaking it down, what I find with clients that are dealing with anxiety is breaking it down and understanding it is the first part of healing. And then, not only practicing those coping skills to manage the symptoms, but eventually what we have to do is we kind of have to dig down into the roots of that anxiety. What difficulties have we faced in the past that the enemy's really kind of laying that thick blanket of toxic anxiety on top of to really just leave us shaking in our boots sometimes when it comes to anxiety. And, the Lord offers hope and healing for that. And so, I think the biggest weapon that we have against anxiety, of course, is God's word, but it's just his love. I think the opposite of love is fear and doubt,
Right.
So this would be a good video, not only for those suffering with the anxiety, but for someone who's trying to help understand, wouldn't it? I mean, I'm thinking
Yes.
that would help. That way you could know better what somebody's walking through and going through.
Right. And, I think one of the tricky parts about dealing with anxiety here in COVID-19 is that often when our lives are going well and we feel like things are going, pretty easy for us, it's easy for us to jump in and help somebody else who's dealing with anxiety. The tricky part about dealing with it now is that we're all anxious. We're all stressed, and we're trying to help those who seemed more stressed than we are. And so, giving each other grace for that and just somehow being with one another, even if that's through a Zoom meeting or a FaceTime, that relationship is going to be so important because we're all dealing with anxiety, and then we may also be trying to help somebody else deal with their anxiety. So it's going to be tricky. It's not going to be easy.
All right. Well, we've been talking about the new video counseling series that Dr. Golden has for us and for anyone who would like to participate. But we talked about renewing the mind, encouragement to suffer well, dealing with anxiety. She's got 10 different sessions she's leading. Dr. Golden, pick back up. What's going to be in the next few after the anxiety segments?
Yes. So we're going to have a session on connecting with others during isolation, why it's important for those that may not necessarily naturally want to connect with others, and how we can do that. And then we also want to just talk about balancing work and rest. A lot of us are, quote unquote, stuck at home with nothing to do. Others are busier than ever. And so we just want to talk about how do we balance that under these new conditions. And then we just want to talk about serving others. Debbie talked about prayer walking her neighborhood. Our churches are jumping in by, deacons and pastors calling everybody to check in. How are we to reach others when we are supposed to be distancing ourselves from others?
Wow, those are definitely interesting topics.
Yes, yes.
It is. And one thing I wanted to think about is like the balancing work and rest. I mean, I know we don't have a lot of time, but could you just give us a couple of quick tips maybe?
Sure. So, for those that are stuck at home, we're losing motivation. How do we keep up with our schoolwork or with our job that seems to be waning? And so how are we to stay motivated to complete our tasks? And for those that are busier than ever, how are we taking time to rest and restore ourselves before we go back out and try to serve our community? And just trying to speak to both of those groups and any others that we become aware of, those that are busier than normal, and then those that are just lacking motivation because it seems like there's just nothing to do. So we want to just speak to both of those groups and encourage both of those groups for balance.
Yeah, well, that'll be good then. That'll speak to both. And, as we're thinking about this, we're going to have definitely a new balanced normal. There's a new normal now for us. And could you kind of help us understand about that and what is this new normal going to look like?
Yes. So, I'm kind of thinking about it in two different ways. We'll have two sessions. One of them is going to be, what is our Corona normal? A lot of us have tried so hard to keep our regular routines, and we're grieving that we can't do what we have always done. What we did 3 weeks ago, Monday through Friday or Saturday and Sunday, we may not be able to keep all of those things. And so we really just want to talk through, what are some new routines that we need to be structuring our lives around? What are some of the old things that we find comfort in that we want to keep on our docket, but how can we be flexible with with these new circumstances? And then in the final session, we're going to have another new normal post corona. And what are we learning now? What changes are we making now in this current normal that we'll want to take over to the post corona normal? And what are things that we want to make sure that we're not doing in the new normal? And so, it's important for us to have structure and routine, those things that make us comfortable, those things that help us to be productive. And all of that's just kind of been turned on its head. And when we get out of corona, all of it will be turned on its head again. And so just navigating, how do we do that well?
That I do think there's a lot of lessons to be learned during this time, and encouraging people to take that opportunity to think on that, to journal, to process, to be aware. Do you have any tips for how to just take a few minutes every day to reflect and maybe think toward what do I want to change?
Sure. Jennifer, a good friend who's also a counselor and a missionary overseas, she reminded me the other day that it's really difficult to process trauma when you're in the middle of it. And so I think that we can do those things. We can be journaling. Something that I'm trying to do is to keep a gratitude journal at the end of every day. What are 5 things that I'm thankful for? And so, I think if we have the capacity to do that, to maybe write down what's the best thing that happened today, what is the worst thing that happened today, but also give yourself grace in knowing that we are not going to be able to fully process what all is happening until we feel like we are emotionally and physically safe from this trauma.
But I'm an achiever and I want to do it now. So.
Yes, I know. And that's, you and I are probably in the same place, because my first thought was, how do we jump in and do something? And then I was reminded, Melissa, you need to take some time on the inward topics as well. I need to be managing my anxiety well. I need to make sure that I am resting, because if I'm not caring for myself, then I won't be helpful to anybody else. And so, Jennifer, you and I are the same on that. Debbie, I don't know where you are, but my inclination is to jump in and do something. And we need to do that, but we also need to make sure that we're taking an inventory of how are we doing, spiritually, and then also how are we doing mentally and emotionally, so we can jump in and help well.
Right. And one thing I thought of course, I want to jump in, is to contact our government officials, let them know how we feel. Or, and that does help to release some emotions, because I actually called Mayor Woodfin's office this week earlier and issued, just shared a support statement in what he's trying to do for Birmingham. And it made me feel better just that I had just made a quick phone call, not to complain or anything, but just to say, hey, I'm standing with you. And I just let his secretary know I was praying for him. So things like that can give us a little bit of an outlet, I think.
Yes,
to say,
absolutely.
I'm doing some small part. I'm calling an official to say, I'm praying for you.
And wow, how unique is that for them to get a positive phone call too, right?
Yes, I'm sure most of their feedback has not been positive. So I'm sure that was very heartfelt and very well received.
So at the top, we mentioned the telehealth and the fact that while we can't be in the same place right now together, we can still have counseling sessions, and you're doing that through video counseling. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Yes. So if you're interested in online counseling, I won't speak for other counseling practices, although I'm sure that they are working to make that happen as well. But Transformation Counseling, we're online, and we're using a confidential audio-visual video conferencing system. It's called Doxy, and they are HIPAA compliant, they're high-tech compliant. And so what we're having to do is you can go online to transformationcounselinginc.com, fill out a little bit of paperwork and get that to me, and then we can set up those online counseling sessions. And so while 2 or 3 weeks ago we were limited to the Prattville community because counseling I think works best in person in the most ideal situations. However, we need to be offering these services to where people can access them safely now. And so those are available for any resident of Alabama. And the reason that it's only available to Alabama for transformation counseling is because my licensed professional counselor license is only in Alabama at this point. So I think that candidates for good telehealth, effective telehealth counseling would be probably age 12 and up, is my first thought, for just to be able to have kind of this one-on-one counseling session. With younger children, you need to be on the floor playing games, and that's just not quite possible here yet. And probably mild to moderate issues, maybe some severe issues, but things that you can actually just talk with somebody like we're doing now, talking through issues. So 12 and up, maybe mild to moderate issues, and people in Alabama, you all can reach out to us at transformationcounselinginc.com, and we can get set up as soon as next week, probably.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I know this is a great helps for people.
Thank you.
Here.
Yes.
All right, so tell us a little bit again about the video series that's going to be on your YouTube channel. So that's available to everyone, free of charge, right? So
Yes.
yeah.
Just log on and enjoy. They're about, the longest one is a little over 10 minutes, and we have sessions 1 through 4 available right now, and at least 10 to come.
All right, and that YouTube channel is
Transformation Counseling Inc. You can also go to transformationcounselinginc.com on the resources page, and you'll see links to all the videos and a quick little blurb about each one. So you can pick and choose, or you can watch the whole series.
Well, that sounds great, Melissa. We appreciate what you are doing. You really
Thank you.
do.
I appreciate what y'all are doing. Y'all work around the clock to keep us informed and to keep us upbeat, and I love getting my news from the Alabama Baptist newspaper. It's one of my favorite things.
Well, we appreciate that, and thanks for reading. We do have the print edition, the digital edition. We have a website that has lots of late-breaking items on it at all times, social media, and as you see here, a podcast and radio show. So we're really excited to be part of the media group here at Tab Media. And thank you for serving with us, Dr. Golden, and thank you for what you're doing. We will be excited to see how this works with our new video recording. So thanks for being our first guest in this format. And thank you all for listening and watching. We'll be back next week.